Jade,
Hello.
welcome to the Boardroom.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. We got you here eventually. We've been trying to have this chat for a couple of weeks, but for many reasons we've both had hectic schedules, haven't we?
Yes, it's that time of year.
It really is, especially March. March was... I'm still getting over it, to be quite frank. Hopefully when this comes out in a few weeks' time, it'll all be business as usual, so to speak. But well, as I say, thanks for coming down. And as is kind of tradition now, what I always like to do is obviously discuss what you're doing at the moment, which is very exciting. I think it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, let's throw it back.
Yeah.
So school, how were you?
So I was a bit of a mixture in school. So I was diagnosed with hyperactivity at 2. So you can imagine I was very bullish in school, but also very highly intelligent as well. So if a subject really interested me, I would hyperfixate. Yeah. Anything I wasn't interested in, I was 100% being an absolute nightmare in that class.
Totally understand, yeah.
But all in all, school life was, I got good grades.
Yeah.
I went to college. I dropped out within 2 months. It wasn't for me.
Funny story, yeah, I was the same.
But yeah, I was very academic, but very much on my terms.
Yeah.
Fine, that was.
So you were local, or where were you?
Yeah, so I'm actually from Brighton originally. Been here pretty much my whole life. Moved to Horsham for a few years at the age of 11. Done my first few years of secondary school at a school called Townbridge up there, and then relocated back to Brighton. Finished my school life, and then moved recently up to Crawley. So
still mid Sussex. So you're very much Sussex based.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you said that, because I think, in fact, funny story, people don't know this at all actually, so I'll let you into a secret. So I was actually exactly the same as you. So I was diagnosed, although my parents never told me, until I was 24, if I'm totally honest, with ADHD and all the things that even back then actually they didn't really know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating what you've said there about the hyperfixation, because I was exactly the same at school. It was very much, if it was a subject that I liked, I was all in.
Yeah.
I was all in on sport. I was really into my sciences. But on the flip side, although actually I use it all the time, every day now, when it came to like English and maths, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And I was like, I don't need to do this, etc. And then I kind of had to teach myself how to use punctuation, which I'm still not great at, later in life. But it's amazing how you can turn that kind of, what I would say is a typical disadvantage as from a social constructs perspective, into actually, I think it's a superpower. I've said this in a previous podcast, I think, with someone that I was on. It's total superpower, because if you're able to dial in, focus, and then bring their energy levels to whatever it is that your sphere is, you can kind of double down on it, can't you?
Yeah.
Which is obviously something you've utilised and harnessed as well, right?
Yeah. So it's definitely something that I learnt to understand about myself. I was very beneficial that my mum worked in mental health for a very long time. Perfect. So hyperactivity at 2 in a female, well, ADHD wasn't researched in women until 2017.
It didn't exist, right?
When I did then go through my diagnosis later in life, I just had my diagnosis of hyperactivity upgraded to ADHD. Yeah. It's not really an upgrade. That comes with its detriments.
Just a term.
I think it has really played a lot of benefit with me being successful in sales throughout my working life, property management when I was working in lettings as well, because of being and the organisation side of things, and also being able to do 3 people's work in an hour. 100%. So it does have its benefits massively in the workspace, and especially if you're doing a sort of more creative role and you're allowed to kind of work your day as you wish. But it is definitely a superpower. I don't see it as a disadvantage as much as I did initially.
You first see that and you think, shit, what's wrong with me, don't you? And then you kind of actually break it down, and it's...
A list of personality traits is the diagnosis, and it's part and parcel of who you are. It doesn't make you any different from the person next to you. It just means your chemical wire-up's slightly different to the average, and you're more of a creative than an administrator. Yeah. That's it.
And is there such thing as even average? Again, everyone across the board, I don't think there's any one person that doesn't have, something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just called chemical makeup. Being a human, 100%.
And if every human was the same, the world would be a pretty boring place, right?
It'd be really boring.
Right? So I don't mind. I like my scatty days.
I think that's called AI. So we're going that way. Don't worry.
Yeah, for sure.
That's another story altogether. But good. So you, obviously school was, by the sounds of it, a challenge for you, but also an exciting one because you were navigating a kind of different path to the average pupil, for example.
Yeah.
But you came out of it with decent grades, decent things, and
yeah, and I had some fantastic teachers as well that kind of recognised that there was a difference, and actually drove it in the areas that I was passionate about. So I was huge on dance and drama, and history for some strange reason was a massive topic. But I was very beneficial that my drama teacher when I was at the school in Horsham really drove me in that subject, and actually did write me a sponsorship letter to Brit School to support me with getting a scholarship. Sadly, I didn't get it. I missed out by 1% against somebody else.
It's the same rugby, don't worry.
It's one of those things, isn't it? But you can't, I guess you can't weigh it down. I still do TV extras work. I'm a DJ at the weekend. So all of that side of things is still there.
It's all come through from that.
Yeah, and that just took one teacher in primary school and another in secondary school to just recognise that and drive that forward. And that's really what teachers should be doing
100%.
with the kids.
It's so influential, and people don't realise your formative years. So you're kind of, 3 to, well, adulthood really, but say 16.
Yep.
How much the smallest of things can actually impact your entire life as well.
And
and that's really refreshing to hear that, the story of the people that supported the strengths of you, because I think typically, I know I was unfortunately the opposite of that. It was kind of like, they always said, well, if you're really good at that, you should focus on that.
Yep.
Whereas my mentality, and to this day, and I still believe in it, rightly or wrongly, it's open to discussion, but I always say, why would you not play to your strengths?
Yeah, exactly that. And teachers should be driving that in children
100%.
To get them to where, and I appreciate academics is a thing that we all have to go through, but if you see something in someone that could create a spark, then why are you not driving that? That's what your job is as a teacher, in my opinion. But
I do too. I think you should always have, we all have to have, of course, a base level of everything, but, excellence is only achieved through, dedication and being driven to do that thing. If you were... I don't think there's anyone. Elon Musk said this. I thought it was really quite fascinating. Actually, he said there is absolutely no single individual that is excellent at everything. It's just not possible.
Yeah, exactly that.
And if there were, actually the world would be in big trouble because everybody else would be useless. There'd just be no point in us being here. So having that kind of drive to the areas that are passions for someone or that they're just naturally very good at, double down. 100% double down.
Yeah.
Mine was, as you can probably tell, my gob. I was good at talking. And less so at writing. It's like, okay, so am I going to study to be an author, or should I go more into something that's linguistic?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to go linguistic because that's what you're better at and that's what you're passionate at.
Yeah, exactly that.
So you left school and then college. So I picked up on what you said there because I think I was in the same camp. So what's the story? So you went to local college? Or?
Yeah, so I actually went to Cardinal Newman Secondary School once I moved back to Brighton. I went to sixth form because that's what my parents wanted me to do. As most people that are my generation probably experience that with their parents, because your 100%. Parents want you to have every opportunity that they didn't have the option to have because of one reason or another. My parents were very young when they had me, so they missed those years of development in college life and things like that, and ended up having to go and get a trade and work self-employed and be completely different route. Yeah, so I decided way before going to sixth form that was also the route for me, going straight into work, doing an apprenticeship and training up that way. However, my parents didn't want that life for me, so I did the sixth form thing. Lo and behold, there was 2 lessons that I didn't like, so I stopped going. And I got called into, along with my parents, to the head of year. And knowing what was going to come, I walked in and said, before you say anything, I'm dropping out. I'm out. So my parents couldn't say anything. And equally, there was no sort of repercussions or punishment. It was then all on my shoulders to go and find that apprenticeship and go and do the do, essentially.
100%.
So yeah, that was very short-lived, but I did like those normal subjects. I did my drama, I did my dance, I did history at A-level, very boring subject that I got at A-level, so I lost interest in history.
It get a bit deeper when you get there, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think it was like Russian language or something I was learning in history, so completely off. Yeah. What I was learning at A-level, which was English medicine, so it was very dramatically different, and I very quickly lost interest, along with, I think it was photography that I was doing, and my teacher just wasn't very engaging, so again, lost interest. So made the decision to drop out, went and got a job in a restaurant as a waitress, short term. Then was a bit rebellious in my late teenage years, and then went into hairdressing at 19. So very different to what I'm doing.
So quite a jump through in a short period of time though as well, which is interesting. And I totally agree. I mean, I was exactly the same. So with college, it was, you know, you go to college. You know, people of sort of our generation was you go college and then it's either university or out into work.
Yeah.
And I was very much similar. I think I took biology and business studies and something else. And I was at Baswick, and I was there really for the sport. I was big into my rugby, etc. And yeah, you know, the biology side of things, it was a big level up when I got there, and I suddenly realised I'm not a biologist. And the business studies was fascinating because actually I realised from my, you know, I ran businesses when I was quite young.
Yeah.
I was sat in this room and I was actually answering some of the questions for the teacher, and I was thinking this is the wrong way round.
Yeah.
And like yourself, it's having that kind of decision-making skill and ability at quite a young age, both of us, obviously that's what, 16, 17, somewhere around there, to go, no, this isn't right. You know, my conundrum was, my mum, bless her, she said to me, she said, the only way you're dropping out is if you have a job beforehand. So I went to the car for a week and then buggered off from there as well. So it's a very, very similar story to yours. So you know, straight into, you know, doing the waitressing, etc. And then you went into hair then. So that's, you know, my co-director Ross actually did the same thing.
Yeah.
Because that's actually quite a full-on industry. So what was the story there? Was that, how long were you doing it for? Where?
So I done my qualification at 19. I was training at The Point. I was there as a trainee stylist at the time because I'd done the fast track course. So my passion for hairdressing come from being a child. One of my dad's ex-partners from very young, who was essentially like a second mum at that period of time, and still is to this day. Although her and my dad are separated, we still have a fantastic relationship. She's the mother of my younger sister. And I used to go around because she was self-employed. So in the summer holidays, I would be with her because my dad was a self-employed tradesman. So I'd be with her in her salon and would be helping and really started to understand that kind of industry, and I liked it because every conversation was different, everything you were doing was different, every haircut, every client was something different. And for me, doing something that's the same all of the time is really unstimulating, and I get bored very quickly. So that's where the decision kind of came in from there. But because I went into the A-levels and then had a bit of a rebellious period with my parents, it took a little bit of time for me to actually go into it. So when I did, it did mean that I had to pay for the course because of my age, which is understandable at that point, but it's what I wanted to do. Sadly, once I qualified, I got made redundant from the salon. And I couldn't, because I was already qualified, it was really difficult then to find a placement somewhere as a trainee stylist with no experience. So at that point, I went and got a job in a call centre selling Sky warranties. So that's when my journey completely shifted from sort of front of house, face-to-face interaction to going into that sort of sales environment, working on the phones and pummeling people with phone calls. Sorry for anyone that was on the other end of that.
Attacked by Jade. But actually, that's interesting because although you changed direction, and this is something I spoke with Ross at such great length about, because it's quite funny really, but the social skills that you pick up, you know, and I only know this because I was educated by him on it, but I assume it's a similar story with yourself. The social skills, a tongue twister, that you get from meeting new people every day in the salon. You know, you almost become like a therapist talking to, you know, when they're in the chair, etc., etc. Although by the sounds of it, you know, disappointing and fairly short-lived, not your fault at all, obviously, with the redundancy, probably really helped with going into the hardcore side of sales, because you knew how to talk to people, if you know what I mean. So is that kind of right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But
and I was living on my own at the time, so I had to just go and get a job, and one of my friends was working there, and actually it was the best thing I ever done. And as much as call centres have a bad reputation, and I completely understand why, because there are a lot of them out there that are scamming people and are taking the absolute mick out of, especially the older generations, which I completely disagree with. There was a period of time that it was legitimate through the likes of like your Domestic and Generals and people like that, and I had a very successful career in that, and actually it led me to where I am now. So it taught me a lot. It definitely taught me a lot, and within the first 6 months of going into sales, I was working my way towards a team leader, and that come from working in a salon and knowing how to deal with people.
100%. It's all about that social understanding and finding what people's, depending on the scenario, what their pain points are or what they're looking to achieve, and then providing the solution. And I think that's the biggest thing with sales. I hate the word like salesperson, saleswoman, salesman, whatever it might be, because actually, whilst everything is sales. Life is sales. Life is sales in general. But actually, it's not about the selling. It's about the problem solving. And if you're coming at it from that mindset and that mind frame, not of how much am I going to get if I sell them this product, this service, whatever it might be, but actually, okay, how can I help this person if they want to deal with Virgin and actually, we can save them £20 a month. For example, I'm just using random numbers. Actually that's huge. Brilliant. I've made some money on the commission side for making that call, but on the flip side, I've saved Mr. and Mrs. Smith £240 a year on their bill. When you reframe that, sales is easy. It's so easy, isn't it?
And
but
what
it takes a long time to do that.
I think people miss the fact that, like you mentioned, like life is sales. We transact time for money.
100%.
Every day. Everyone that works transacts their time for money. That's a sales process. 100%. Whether people see it as that way or not, that is a sales process because you're transacting something for something. And that is what working in that industry kind of taught me because, like you say, I was earning a commission, but that's my time.
100%.
And I've been able to help that person save money. So I'm getting paid a commission, but that's part and parcel and one of the benefits of being in this industry. But you learn to be a consultant at the same time, and that's another thing that the salesperson title isn't nice because it makes you seem like you're on people's back all of the time, really weighing them down. But it's actually
hungry, bloodthirsty salespeople.
And that's the reputation that we have as salespeople. But actually,
estate agents.
Exactly, and we get a bad reputation. But actually, what people miss is the fact that you're going through a consultation with that person to help them.
Absolutely, 100%, and how important it is that mindset and that social sort of construct of what people do shifts. And I think, even sounds silly, but even things like these conversations with people that are just real, normal, two people doing different things, having a chat, I think that in a very small way, even things like that go towards changing that narrative of actually, everyone is just a human being, all with different skill sets, different benefits, different cons as well. We all have good things and bad things about us. But you're right, life is just one enormous string of transactions.
Yeah, exactly that.
When you really break it down.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, because someone at some point said that that's the way we're meant to live.
Yeah, that's what we do. And it seems to work all right.
Yeah.
So you're in the call centre.
Yeah.
So how long were you doing that for?
So I was doing call centres for... Where are we now? 2025, aren't we? So... I left school in 2009. I started working in 2012. 5 years?
A decent amount of time.
Yeah, so I originally started with Sky Warranties. I then moved over to working for an energy company, so saving people money on their bills and doing energy switching. I then did the god-awful road accident claims.
Yeah.
And then I did actually disagree. I was legitimate with doing it because I didn't want people to commit fraud and I didn't want that to come back to me. But I also understand how that industry works and that the allocation is kind of already there. Your insurance premium was already affected and all of that stuff. So I did that, worked my way up to team leader, was at the point where I was interviewing for office manager position. And then because of a few other people in the business, we got shut down by the Ministry of Justice.
Wow.
At that point, I decided no more call centres and to go into a proper sales job, which was recruitment. And I spent 4.5 years in recruitment doing construction, trades and labour. Was very successful, but that taught me how to take that consultative approach and really start to drill down on people's need and become a service as opposed to a salesperson.
100%.
So that was a long process in call centres, but it also made me a great salesperson.
No, I mean, I think that's, truthfully, it's bloody impressive. I think, being able to do that, especially with your background and what we spoke about at the start, with kind of liking differentiation between in the day and stuff. I assume in the call centre, I'm sure it was all very different, but the processes are probably fairly similar, right?
Yeah.
In terms of that. So to stick it for sort of 5 years, one must have taught you a hell of a lot about yourself and the skills needed to overcome objections and stuff like that. But also naturally, and it sounds like you were at that point, it then made sense to go, okay, well, am I going to go much further here, or realistically have I garnered what I need to then take that into another role of a similar thing? And recruitment, I mean, God, recruitment is so much like agency.
Yeah, massively.
There's a huge switching between recruiters becoming estate agents and estate agents becoming recruiters and stuff. Because we're matching people to houses and people to properties, etc. in general, and recruitment is essentially just people to jobs and jobs to people. So how was the recruitment side of things for you?
I absolutely loved it.
Step up, yeah.
Absolutely loved it. It was probably the biggest success period that I had in the entirety of my working life, if I'm being completely honest. But it got to a point where it was stagnant, and there was, again, being a female in a male-dominated industry, no room for progression. And that was the difficulty. And I'm one of those that when I get to a certain point, I get bored. And if there's no room for me to grow, then that's me out, because I want to be the best that I can possibly be. And I think with sales, if you're just a salesperson and you're in that same salesperson role for 10 years, you're not doing your job properly. So it was difficult to navigate my way through it. But being on the construction desk, I was the only female on my team. Those opportunities just weren't there. How big was the team, Mel? So we had 4 people on the trades and labour desk, and we had 6 on the white collar, so permanent roles. I was on the blue collar. My divisional manager was moving on along with one of the other guys on the team, and naturally the other guy got the management position because he was the man on the team.
Naturally, I'm not sure is the right word, but
no, but at that time, that was normal, and I didn't think anything of it, but that was the normal then. So as disappointing as it is,
there was 10, 12 people, and you were the only female in that business.
Yeah, and one of the most successful, earning the most money too, because of being a female in construction. So
100%. 100%. It's something we're going to talk about later, isn't it? Especially about the agency world, because I think it's a really, really interesting topic, and I think there's a lot of things that we can go through for sure. But how was that? I mean, obviously, it sounds like you're sort of reflecting on it as a sort of a positive and negative period potentially. I mean, the positive, obviously, you were extremely good at it, extremely successful.
Yeah.
I suppose the negative was it sort of almost, I don't know whether lonely is the right word, but was it a little bit kind of like...
It was a lonely world. I may as well have been self-employed doing that job, because, well, naturally it's not naturally, I shouldn't say naturally, but at that moment, at that point in time, this whole women in this or women in that was not a thing. Technology created the first women in tech, and that's when women started to really get recognised within their industries. And I think being the only female in that team, of course I was isolated because the men didn't want me to succeed, as horrible as that sounds. When I look back on it,
crazy mindset.
I know, and it's that when I look back, I'm grateful because it taught me a hell of a lot, and I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. But when I look back, it was very wrong how it was managed and how things were, how I was spoken to a lot of the time, the comments that would be made at me, and that side of things is not right. So there's that disappointment in that period of time, but there's also a lot of gratitude as well for what it's taught me.
And hopefully seeing how much it's moved on to. I mean, still obviously lots of work to be done, but looking at that period of time from an outsider in, it's sort of, you say naturally, and you're totally right, it is naturally, it's just that it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be,
sense, and so that word, unfortunately, is the correct term, but it shouldn't be the correct term, if you know what I mean. And I think it's something that, is always going to be a factor in life. Although I do think there's huge strides being made, and you were at a convention recently that you said about recently, I mean, awesome. That kind of thing needs to be pushed further and further, whether it's in the recruitment or, say, what we'll talk about shortly in agency massively. I've got a really big thing about that. But so you kind of thought, well, look, this isn't working. You've clearly been very successful, but due to external factors, you weren't going to be taking that next step in that company, which frustrating, disappointing, whatever it might be. But what doors did that open when you sort of looked up and went, okay, what am I doing here? So
it was probably the first time I'd updated my CV in about 5 years because of being involved in that industry. I'd worked for one of the smaller recruitment agencies within the industry, and then went to work for the biggest and stayed there for a long time, left and went back. And then from updating my CV, got headhunted for a role that I never even would have thought of applying for because I thought it was way above my pay grade.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was for a completely different industry. It was just before COVID. I got an offer of £30,000 with a car allowance, and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I didn't know what more than 18 grand a year was at that point. I was like, I'm worth 30 grand a year? Not a chance.
But we'll run with it,
and he rang me and he was really keen on getting me in, and it was a company in Red Hill called Restore Records Management. So they're a document archiving company. They have different divisions, so they help with office moves, they help with digital filing and box storage as well. So I was on the box storage side. 30 grand a year, car allowance, great bonus, fantastic company to work for, absolutely loved them. COVID hit. And then everything just went, didn't it, for everybody?
Oh my God, COVID. I don't think, and I was waiting for that word to come in, I'm on a streak. So I think we're 12 podcasts in, bar one. I'm currently on an 11 streak of COVID coming up.
Yeah.
Because it did, and not in a wrong way. COVID affected everybody in every industry, not even talking about obviously the horrific side of it, which is life and health and everything, but just talking on the business side. What a time to be alive.
I know, and I was very lucky that I was working for the company that I was, because for the first 6 months they continued to pay me full pay. Oh, wow. And I wasn't working. They'd put me on furlough, but they were still paying me full pay. And then sadly, at that 6 month point, they had to make the decision to make redundancies because the part of the business that I was actually in, the division that was my part of the business, physical documents weren't a thing anymore. So the whole business that whole side of the business just
disappeared.
Yeah, and I was based in the south. My manager and the other guy on my team are based in the north. So sadly, I was the one that was let go. And there's no hard feelings. I still speak to my old manager. The other guy that I was working with now actually works in property.
Oh, wow.
Funnily enough.
Small world, yeah.
But that actually gave me a lot of thinking time. Yeah. And going back to the ADHD, first time I'd lived with a mask off, because Sales Jade was Sales Jade all of the time, and I didn't know who I was until COVID hit.
Tunnel vision.
And I was able to day drink and sit in the garden and sunbathe and do all of these things that I hadn't done, which was fantastic. But it also gave me a lot of time with me. Yeah. So it made me understand the reality of life, took myself out of sales brain, stopped focusing so much on money and focused on what I wanted and what I wanted to do. So that's when I went into property, was post-COVID.
Really, yeah. That's just to touch on that. I mean, that's a really kind of honest and raw reflection on that period of time, because I think everyone takes, or took different things from that crazy. I still feel like we're sort of living in it, although it also feels like years and years and years ago. But, it's 5 years ago, I think, as of a couple of weeks ago, I think it was sort of February, we got sort of the first lockdown.
Yeah.
And obviously that time where there is so much more time to reflect, to think, and also in a sort of slight state of no one knew what was going to happen. There was an element of anxiety and panic around a lot of things as well. But using that time for you, I think that's a really powerful thing to have done, because who knows, without I wish it didn't happen, of course, for all the other reasons, but without it happening for you personally, that Sales Jade mask might still be on today.
It would. It 100% would.
It would, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because actually at that point in time was the first time I actually sat and reflected on what ADHD actually was. And that was the point in time that I went through my official diagnosis to get my ADHD formally diagnosed, but also found out at the time, so I'm ADHD, so I have autism and ADHD, so Asperger's and ADHD. Yeah. And when people look at me, they think, well, you look normal, so there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, okay, so tell me what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was the first time that I actually started to understand what it was. Yeah. So recognising my flaws, recognising the things that were good about me, recognising then at the same time that all of these things that I was scared about was just a build up of me. And if I learned how to manage it, then I could be a great success.
100%. And that's it. How can you ever, double down and go for your strengths if you don't inwardly understand yourself? And exactly. I think that's also an evolution as well. Obviously that was the big catalyst for you. But I think we're all, I know I certainly am. We're all still kind of finding ourselves. I don't think that ever stops, does it? And always kind of. We're all developing. We're all sadly aging. Everything. Life is a timeline. It's a timeline, isn't it? And understanding, things from childhood, things from adolescence, things that we naturally are good at, naturally aren't at, condition, whatever it might be. But also then making sure that that's taken in, like what you've done, in a positive light. Of okay, cool. Like I understand exactly what's what. I know how I work. How can I now change my lifestyle or change my approach to really make the most of the gifts I've got. I think that's what I would call it. And have that mindset and mind frame of utilising that moving forward, instead of kind of like, oh God, I'm heavily dyslexic, for example, and it's like, I am crap at writing. I spell it T-I. It's like, but it's like that's okay, because actually I can utilise this for that. And but when it comes to giving a speech in front of, recently one in front of 1,000 people, I was fine, a bit nervous, but absolutely fine. So you can understand those strengths, those weaknesses, whatever they might be, and then double down. And having that time clearly made a huge difference to your life.
Massively, and it allowed me to actually think about me for a change rather than money, because that was very much my mindset before COVID was money. And then obviously had none, and I'd gone from earning over £3,000 a month to earning £750 on universal credit, and that just luckily I was in a council property, so I paid for my rent. But I had a car on finance that I'd committed to from having a car allowance, so I had to find money. So I did start network marketing and stuff just to keep my head above water during that period of time. But I also focused a lot on that personal development, and as a result, it allowed me to come out of the COVID period with my head on my shoulders, knowing exactly who I was, where I thrived, what would continue to allow me to do so and grow and develop as a person. And what I wanted to do and where my passion laid, which was actually property, and actually being able to go, do you know what? The salary doesn't matter. The salary doesn't matter. The money will come. Money's not everything. We just have that on our heads because of the cost of living and everything else and the pressures.
It's programmed in from childhood as well.
Exactly that. And once you learn to live with nothing and manage, you realise that there's so much more to life.
There's so much more to it when it comes to fulfilment, when it comes to balance, when it comes to things. I mean, I'm saying all this, I'm a terrible advocate for it because I work every day of the week. But again, that's. But actually, is it for money? No. It's the passion for what I do. Actually, if it was for money, I wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly.
I'd probably on about 3p an hour. But but it's about exactly that, refocusing, re-envisioning. Okay, what do I want to do? What's going to give me? Yes, enough to get by. Don't get me wrong, money is important for everyone. But
of course.
Having that balance of, okay, well, what's going to give me fulfillment in life as well? And I think, not to get too deep, but that is a huge thing. And I think a lot of people probably came out of that period of time in a very similar mindset. There was a lot of change. It was a monumental, probably once in a lifetime. Hopefully, anyway.
Fingers crossed.
Don't
need another one of those in my life.
Going on, but kind of position of mass change. So let's move on from COVID. So you bashed through, that you came out the other side, and obviously you said property was of interest. So what was the next step coming out of that crazy period?
So I went back into recruitment just short term, just to be working again. Realised that actually I hated it. I didn't want to do it anymore. I don't hate recruitment. I just don't like working for a company with certain companies and their processes, because I think there's a lot of faffing that takes place that doesn't need to take place. So very quickly come away from there, and I actually was applying for property management roles in between. I landed a role with Leaders. So worked with them. It was a very different property management role to what I was expecting. So it wasn't very hands-on. Not a lot of inspections and things like that were in play, not a lot of maintenance reports and stuff like that. And I need to be busy. I'm not a sit behind my computer every day type of person.
Window watcher.
So it just wasn't what I was expecting. So I then went and worked for Hunters in Burgess Hill. That was a really eye-opening experience because it was more of a kind of 360 lettings role. Although I wasn't a lettings negotiator, I would still be responsible for the viewings on the weekends and in the week, and doing all of the property inspections and all of the other things like that, as well as doing the maintenance reports and general maintenance and booking the contractors, so gas safeties and all of that.
Rounded.
And a lot more hands-on, and getting out to properties and being able to meet landlords and actually go through those motions. But there wasn't very much room for development there because it was a very small office. The managers had been there for a very long time, and I got offered a role with John Hilton in Brighton, who are dual agents, so they do professional and student. Was there for just under a year before I got fed up with students. No offence, but it's anyone that is an agent that's working with student market, hats off to you, because them 6 weeks. That changeover is really hard, and some people have it in them and some people don't, and I'm one of those people that just doesn't. And I got burnt out so quickly and realised that my mental health was just not where it should be. And I was already about 3 months before considering going into another sales role, but property based, having understood what PropTech was, and some of the products that we were using were really helpful, and I fell in love with them. So I found the passion for that product, to be a salesperson, you have to have passion for the product.
Don't believe in what you're doing, there's no point in selling it.
So I then went into a company which done utilities management, which I was there up until August last year, got hit with a redundancy. which ended up being direct discrimination.
Brilliant.
Because of my ADHD.
Brilliant.
And then that led me to my now role with Bricks and Logic.
Fine. Cool. That's a lot to unpick. Cool. I was trying to take that all in all at once. So, I mean, look, talk about having a broad range, which is, again, I don't think is a bad thing by any means. I think, some people might go, cool, you're doing a lot, how did you work that out? But again, I think that probably comes from, how you progress through the first sort of 2 jobs at 5 years apiece. Yeah. It sounds like you've spent the past kind of couple of years dialing in on what you want, right? Which I think is absolutely no bad thing, and probably again has really helped with your current role. Yeah. Because you must have seen. I mean, students. I totally agree with you. We don't do students because it's full on. It's full on. There's nothing wrong with doing student accommodation at all. But like you say, it's nothing, and then just chaos, and then it's a so you've sort of got that side of things, and then you were at fairly big corporate as well. Yeah. Leaders are a big company.
Massive.
And huge in lettings, but I assume very, very processed. I don't know, so I'm not going to talk out of turn. But
very processed, and a lot of training as well. And they taught me the importance of gas safeties, electrical safeties, equality and diversity, and all of those little subcategories that you'd have to go through. Yeah. All of that learning come from leaders. So I'm eternally grateful for that position with them. And had the job been a lot more hands-on, I'd probably still be working there, 100%. If I'm being completely honest, because of the brand.
Yeah, and just finding but you also have to find what's right.
What's right?
Yeah. I was saying, I started in agency over a decade ago now. My first job was with a big corporate company, and I think actually there's people often say it's like, independent versus corporate and independent versus online, and every agent and they're all fighting each other, and actually it's like, no, there's benefits to everything. Yeah. The training I received from that corporate organisation was phenomenal. Yeah. Would I say it's utilised in real life to the nth degree? Probably not. No. But the basics, and that's the skill of any salesperson, is the hardcore side of sales, the telephone side of sales, the this, that, and the other, and then you have to round that all off with humanity, so to speak, and take the positives from the corporate, take the positives from the independent, and or anything else. Just talking about agency individually here, because then actually, if you can do a blend of all of your experiences, and that's what everything is. Life is just a sequence of experiences, and you try to learn as much as you go along. You can then impart that into whatever role you're doing, whether it's owning an estate agent or whether it's being in prop tech and a massively emerging market. You can kind of be influential in how that moves forward, I suppose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with going into prop tech, the benefit that I had was understanding the industry from the other side. So important. So I've done essentially what, not to your extent because I was on lettings, but I've done your job. I understand what your process is. So I know that this will slot into your business correctly because I've done it. And I know that if I had it, it would have helped me.
It'd be beneficial.
Yeah. So it's that kind of toss of the coin, but prop tech's much more suited to me than estate agency was.
Yeah, then the kind of being on the front line, so to speak, you can actually go, right, okay, how can we improve agencies or in turn the customer experience as well? That's really important. Yeah. Because that's how I've always framed things is, yes, we're in estate agents and do other bits and bobs, etc. But actually, and we touched a bit briefly off camera, didn't we, talking about this, of how important it is that everything we're doing, yes, of course, it has to make money and blah, 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 but actually everything we're doing should be there to enhance the customer experience. Because the only way you have a sustainable, and have longevity in a business is if you have customers and if they come back and if they recommend. And a reputation is, certainly in my industry, incredibly hard to build. Yeah. So easy to break. Yeah. So easy to break. So, I think what a lot of agents do, this ties in with what you do, they get to the point where they've got a decent reputation and they go, cool, done.
Yeah, done.
Sweet.
Yeah, take the foot off the pedal.
And all of a sudden 10 years has gone past and they're in the dark ages because everybody else has continued to develop and continue to evolve and utilise new technologies. And at the moment, I mean, God, what a time to be alive in terms of how things are rapidly changing in all industries, but very much so in agency. And all of a sudden that reputation that they spent such a long time trying to build and then kind of realised that, relaxed, is gone, or their business has gone, because people will go, well, why do I use you and you've got them over there that are doing this, and this, and then you're on the back foot again and you're scrambling to get back up. So, you know, for me, it's the sort of stuff that keeps me up at night, that kind of anxiety of making sure that we're always one step ahead, because, you know, we'll do something and then, you know, rightly so, it's, you know, copying is the best form of flattery, but, you know, everyone down the road and you're going, shit, I'm back on a level playing field, now we've got to do this, now we've got to do this, but actually it's what keeps you alive, it's what kind of drives you forward. So let's talk about that. So you're with Bricks and Logic. So I guess firstly, very briefly, kind of how did that come about that you went through there, and then we'll talk about the service and products.
So with redundancy that hit last year, at the same time it was like company-wide redundancies that were made. My sales director and my sales manager at the time were also made redundant. My sales director at the time, Annalise, was very good friends with my now sales director, David, and knew that they were looking, had spoken to them for herself, had actually realised that the role was a lot less senior than she was, but had me in the back of her mind, so put me in contact. Nice. And very luckily got on with David and Matt like a house on fire. Had experience of demonstrating a product before, so obviously that was a tick in the box. And I'm quite a quick learner, so kind of understanding a product and
hyper-focus,
being able to just channel it is not really an issue. It's understanding how it works is a lot different, but understanding what the product is quite easy to pick up.
Benefits and what you can do, etc., etc.
Yeah, so that kind of led me to my role. So same interview process as everyone else, 2-3 stage interview process. I had 2 with them, which was quite nice. Initial conversation and then demonstration interview, just to kind of give them an insight as to whether I could or not demonstrate a product.
What you've learned,
So that was a massive tick in the box, and I started there in October of last year, so 6 months, 7 months.
Yeah, it's still fairly fresh, but you know it's a decent amount of time still to get your foot under the table, so to speak, feet under the desk. So that sort of came about. So in terms of that first 6 months, so what have you been up to? What's your role? I guess let's explain your role first and we'll explain the product.
So Bricks and Logic are a data partner for estate agents, essentially allowing them to streamline workflows and consolidate subscriptions. Basically saving you time, allowing you to focus more on the customer journey than doing all of the admin stuff in the background. My role is business development manager, so very much focusing on speaking to agents, introducing the product, demonstrating the product, and then going through the motions if they do want to come on board, getting the contract set up, training them up, and account managing for the first 12 months that they're with us as well.
Quite, again, well-rounded role.
Yeah, I mean, Bricks and Logic's a very new company. They kind of rebranded and relaunched in June of last year. They've been around for a couple of years, but the rebrand and relaunch took place last year. You've obviously seen our public website, that was part of the relaunch. And then we've got a pro side specifically tailored for estate agents. So the public could search their property on Google. Bricks and Logic website would come up. They would then get a load of data points, including demographic data and various other things that they may want to know. They can even do a mortgage calculation on there through the Bricks and Logic website, but that's available to anybody in the UK.
Yeah. So that's sort of from a consumer, and it's national as well, isn't it?
England and Wales.
England and Wales. Fine. Yeah. So they've got access to kind of, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but another big company that sort of do it to a point. Is it kind of a more in-depth version of, say, Zoopla online valuation, and then there's a lot more
very
to it?
Different.
Okay, fine.
Very different to Zoopla. Similar in some circumstances, because Zoopla market your properties, they have access to property data, and a lot of people will go on the Rightmove to get the
they've kind of got
stuff.
That's their main bit of the business, and they've got the back end, which is kind of like, oh, what's my property worth? It's usually wildly wrong, but that kind of, sorry Zoopla, but it's that kind of thing, isn't it? Whereas yours is much more focused, isn't it?
It's a lot more focused, a lot more streamlined, providing agents with, on the agent side, public side is just property data, so giving them property data that's available. We have property data on 28.5 million properties across England and Wales, so there's quite a lot on there. On the agent side, it's being given access to property data, price analysis, brand exposure, web tools like your instant valuations and things like that, market insights and all of the bits in between. So there's a lot more to it than just like your Zooplas or like your Spriffs or home searches or something like that. There's a lot more because we're kind of amalgamating multiple different subscriptions into one place.
Almost kind of like plugging in essentially to a whole new data site essentially.
Yeah.
Which can be never a bad thing in the constantly moving environment at the moment, right? I mean, God, the market has been so volatile over the past since COVID, sort of the past 5 years of these enormous peaks and then huge troughs, and now feels like it's a nice bit of balance, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Out of interest, and you may not know the answer to this, but how have the company, they may have spoken to you about it, how have they found, obviously I know the few years, but obviously at the moment with the market in sort of 23 and 24 being, I'd say, quite flat, how does their data, for people that might be watching going, well, that sounds quite interesting, how is that data kind of compiled in terms of kind of how it's put together?
So Bricks and Logic property data is focused on completions, so any completions that have gone through, we will have access to those properties.
Like skim land reg, basically.
Yeah, so land reg, energy efficiency, EPCs, and that sort of thing. Yeah, so same place where you can source public data yourself, but essentially putting it into one place and colour coding it in a heat map to give you an idea of whether it's performing highly or whether it's performing at a loss, or if you're somewhere in between.
Yeah, really
so it really gives them an opportunity to streamline and back up their story with their vendors and landlords as well.
Yeah, it's consolidating. I mean, God, I couldn't think of anything worse than going through and me personally being like this, that, which is basically what we do on valuations, of course, but on a much more micro scale, but on a almost national scale, as that is, it's a lot of data. It's a lot of data, and I think from the consumer, so from a customer that maybe is in their formative early steps of linking and moving, it's a great place to start by the sounds of it, just giving them an overview, and then I assume that sort of channel then feeds through to the more serious people that are looking to move, which is where you kind of come full circle back around to being involved with the agents, is that right? And kind of helping us give them far more accuracy, much more data points and facts on why the property might be worth this and what to do about it, etc. Is that right?
Yeah, so what the public see is based off of what we have access to on the public data side. So not every property is going to be correct. As we know, property data across the entirety of the UK is rubbish. It could be much better. So we do put that across, and we do grade the data score as well from 1 to 5, so people have an idea of what the average error could be on that valuation. But on the agent side, it's giving them the opportunity to kind of streamline that and see properties around the area of the same size and stature, same attributes and what they're doing. So they start to see market trends and things.
And all these other things,
and all that, like rental change, sales change, price per square foot, gross yields, things like that. All of those different data points are there for the agent, which aren't going to be as interesting to the vendor or landlord, but they're property data that is available to them. I mean, I'll show you after the demonstration the public data side and what the public website and what they have access to is a lot more than anyone else I've ever seen in the market.
Yeah, 100%. And actually it's crucial because, you'd be amazed, or maybe you wouldn't be amazed, but most people would be amazed by, not being in the industry, by how little, I'm not going to generalise here, but just to, from my own knowledge and research, agents kind of going out to a property and they don't take anything at all. It's kind of like, so what do you think it's worth? About that. And I think there's a huge shift nowadays, and say in the past sort of 3 or 4 years, towards, because there's so much online, because there's so much data, although actually that can become quite confusing for the consumer, a lot of people kind of have a rough idea of what their property's worth anyway. So showing your workings, like being at school, but showing that kind of the reason, the backing, the comparable evidence, the everything to how you got to those numbers is massive. It's something we're really big on here. It's so crucial because there is a stigma. There is an agent that might go out and value it at X on the lower side because they might have someone for it. Not really the way to do business. The flip side, you got people that are just they call listers, so to speak, that perhaps don't have their heart in the right place for helping the client, and it's like, okay, well, what would the client want to hear, not what do they need to hear. And it's very easy to just say a number with absolutely no backing. Whereas where you want to have a really good estate agent, an estate agent that genuinely cares about helping that person make that next step in their journey, is someone who is totally considered and actually takes that data, a bit of everything, plus, of course, really importantly, your own, you should be experienced, have knowledge, etc., etc. But be able to say, no, this is where I believe, and again, you're never absolutely right. Anyone that says you will get this is a total lie. But, I've got all of the tools in order to get you the best price in the best time frame.
Yep.
And my recommendation is that we are in this region of value based on all of this.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, from the sounds of it, and this is why it's such a nice conversation to have, kind of very fresh, because I'm as new to this as a lot of people that will be watching.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think is a good thing. You
Yeah.
know, so this isn't an advert for you guys or anything like that, because I haven't.
No,
it's more a case of, you know, it's just a fascinating industry talking point.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like there's an awful lot in that back end that ties into what really good agents should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
And if it can be made easier, happy days.
Yeah, so the idea for the agent side, and when we're saying is streamlining your time, so a lot of agents will have to look in multiple different places when it comes to building out their comparables or doing the valuation and things like that, and having to take different things to evaluation with you, whereas with the Bricks and Logic platform, you can simply take your phone, your laptop, your iPad with you, you can print off a report that has everything in it, you can send them a digital report, you can take it with you to go through it with them, but it just makes it a lot more interactive. Also streamlines the time for you guys because everything's in one place and it's all at the click of a button. You can do everything that you need to do, what you would do on external platforms, in one place, click a button, it's put into a report for you, which is white labelled with your branding, data full with everything that's on the public website, as well as other things that you guys would only have access to. And then that creates
exclusivity as well.
And then we've also, where we've got our heat maps, it allows them to be, it's just a little bit more fun for the vendor as well, because it makes it more interactive. I think estate agency, and this, no offence to anyone that kind of operates like this, it's a very dated industry.
Archaic, I say it all the time.
And in truth be told, my generation are now the people that are going to be your homeowners and landlords. So if you're not changing things up and providing them with that data or making things interactive or putting them digital,
100%.
You're going to lose against someone that is. 100%. And that's the reality. And if people aren't willing to get on board with that, then they're going to very quickly get forgotten.
As they are. You know, 100%, I totally agree.
Yeah.
You know, it was only 4 or 5 years ago that I started doing, you know, property videos, and, you know, bluntly, the industry kind of laughed. You know,
but look at it now.
You know,
people have got TikTok accounts and all sorts now because
how much it's moved forward. You know, we've sold numerous properties off of social media, not the portals, for example. You know, and again, everything. Again, it's not this or that and for or against. I've always said this. It is about having a wide scale of all of it.
Yeah.
You know, TikTok and Instagram is not going to take over from Rightmove.
Absolutely not. But you move it with the times.
But they will add to it.
Yeah.
You know, and same with, you know, I've recently gone into, you know, and I was a skeptic, 100%. A bit like, you know, I could say I'm not a skeptic, but I don't know enough about it. But say, oh, I'm a skeptic about this, or with Meta ads, you know, and Facebook marketing and things like that. And I thought, really, come on, mate. You know, I've just ran an interesting campaign. The results were phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
So it's a constant evolving of technology, but also making sure that you've taken into account all platforms, because there is also lots of people, not to be ageist in any way, shape or form, but, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith that are in their late 70s, they're probably not on TikTok. They may well be. Props to them if they are. Happy days. I'm sure a lot of them
unlikely.
are. But, you know, they're probably more, but they might not even be Rightmove. They're probably more, you know, the paper details that we actually take out to them. And that's okay. You know, that's absolutely fine. So it's about having that blend of, you know, the full spectrum of
digital and paper.
Marketing approaches. And the good agents that will implement that. You know, I don't think there's any agent that is just on Instagram, for example. You know, but I also think there's agents that are just about getting the hang of how to price something properly on Rightmove. So, you know, the gulf of the industry at the moment, I think, is vast. You know, the spectrum of it is, you know, from haven't moved out of 1981 to kind of really at the forefront of selling properties. Whereas I think 10 years ago, it was probably more like this. That scale. It's kind of like, okay, 10 years ago, people were starting to do floor plans. Bougie.
Whoa.
You know? Whereas, you know, you know, that gap between the two was very small. Whereas now I just think it's widening and widening and widening. And the landscape is going to continue to change with the integration of AI and more software programs like yours and all these other things. I think the next 5 to 10 years will be a very, very interesting sort of landscape when it comes to sales.
I agree, and I think there's also this massive generational gap as well, isn't there, in the industry, where you've got not a lot of younger people coming through. So the younger ones are the ones that are on the social media, that are doing the technology. So they're the ones that can feed that in and like utilise your younger team.
100%.
They're the ones that know what they're doing with this stuff. Utilise them for what they're good for,
100%.
which is social media and technology.
Yeah.
You're not going to have everybody that comes through your business that's going to be a 30, 35-year-old looking to buy a home or become a landlord. You are still going to have Mary that's 65 and is
Place
selling
for
her
everyone.
home, right?
Yeah.
But more younger generations, and I don't know what's changed about the industry and why younger people aren't coming through so much now, but you've got a lot of older mindsets in estate agents, which then knock on effect with prop tech because they don't want to change the way that they're doing things. I mean, I spoke to an agent the other day in Wales who was still doing everything on paper, and I was absolutely baffled. I was thinking, how on earth are you managing it on paper?
Yeah.
I couldn't even manage it in a CRM a lot of the time because of the amount of times things change.
Yeah, I mean, even when I started out, it was like paper applicant cards, paper diaries, paper, the CRM system was kind of a fallback and not a tool. It was like, oh yeah, we got that CRM thing that, we occasionally put things on, but usually don't bother, and just so underutilising.
Yep.
Maybe from a lack of education, lack of understanding, but also I think from a little bit of kind of, if you bury your head in the sand, it will all go away.
And creatures of habit as well, aren't we? We don't like change. And if we've been doing things, like you say, like a lot of agents still operate like they were in 1981, that's just how the industry is because that's how everyone's been trained. But it's 2025 now, guys. It's about 44 years since that point in time. It's a long time to be kind of thinking.
You touched on something really interesting there, which we kind of round off the podcast with, I think, and that's twofold. So, one, it's youth in the industry, and two, and I know you're a huge advocate for this, and as am I, and that's women in agency as well, and actually business in general. I think we can broaden that.
Yeah, for sure.
So two quite serious topics, quite deep topics. I mean, maybe if we start with the youth side of things. I've got my theories, but I'd be interested to hear yours. Why is it that why do you think that there's sort of a lack of the younger generation coming into the property world?
I think it is personally. I think it's down to personal experience with agents. Everyone rents at some point, whether they're a student or they're an adolescent or they're in their 20s, 30s. Everyone rents a property at some point or goes through a sales process. And let's be honest, a lot of agents don't let to younger people very, very well or very nicely. And I think that creates an element of not wanting to be involved with the industry. Alongside that, I think less women are looking to get into sales. And that's scary. Because it's creating this massive division where you're going to have this male-dominated industry again. And I think you touched on it before, a lot of the applicants that you get are young males, not so much young females. And that's a scary thought. And I think that there's not enough focus on going into colleges and going into schools and talking about property. I think it's talking about recruitment and all of these other fun things that you can do in trades and going into an apprenticeship and all of these things.
Everyone can be an Instagram star and stuff as
right?
well.
But no one's focusing on the property industry. And let's be honest, it's the only industry that's ever going to survive.
100%.
It's the only industry that you can go into that's never going to fall on its feet and be taken over by AI completely.
No, because people are intrinsically,
and AI can't sell a house.
No, I totally agree. I think there's going to be lots of changes, but I think there is no such thing as the human element. I mean, it's been tried to be taken out of. It failed miserably.
Yeah, with the online viewings and things.
It's been tried. And we're talking. It started out 20 years ago. People tried to go, okay, well, let's try and take the people out of property. It doesn't work.
No,
you can't do it.
No,
you can utilise the technology to sort of lessen the burden on the people side of things.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to the nuts and bolts. You're totally right. I think you have to have that human involvement in there. You're dealing with hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds. People buy from people. I know it's cringy, but it's so true.
It's a trust process as well, isn't it? You're selling your home. Like, this is some people's livelihoods. Like, 100%. Sometimes it's their family home. Sometimes they're having to sell it for not a real reason. The computer's not going to be able to give them that emotional level that a human can.
It can't.
And that's never going to be taken away from us in property.
Yeah, it can enhance and back up, but it can't be the power driver. It can't be the front of house, so to speak. And I think that's really, really important of how we move the industry on to benefit both sides of that coin, if you know what I mean. Now, my thoughts on it, and as I say, who am I to say I don't know for sure, but I think, and what we're really trying to do here for sure is that sort of an evolution of what you've just said there with, you know, making people want to be involved. I think there is an element of, well, it's not worth being an agent if, you know, and this is a huge topic that needs, you know, we can talk about this for hours, but if you can earn the same stacking shelves in Sainsbury's, not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way, as being an estate agent, which is much more hours, high pressure, high stress, you know, and it is, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to try and say that it's not hard, it's a bloody hard job.
It is, yeah.
Well, actually, it's about making people want to come and do it again.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact, maybe again, of explaining to young people in general, but also specifically women, why the industry is actually there's such a skill. There's such a skill to it. You know, I'm still learning now. I've been doing it over 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, and I will continue to be learning until I die. You know, you don't ever stop learning of different techniques. And yes, it gets from, you know, the basics to the more molecular level of becoming a proper expert. But it's that journey, that process of actually, you know, agents aren't what you might have dealt with when you were renting a property through X, Y, Z, and you were treated like shit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it, but actually, this is how it can be done, and you can be part of that change. I think that that narrative, it needs to change, and it also needs to be worth people coming, and that comes from the top down. Yeah,
and I think like equally as well, with that being said, like whether you're an independent or you're working for a big franchise brand or a big corporate, like you need to be attending those careers days and those skill up days and things like that to be positioning property in front of them, because every other industry is, and property isn't. No. And that's where it's getting missed, because those people that are just fresh out of school, we're all busy. None of us have enough hours in the day. But if we want the industry to survive and grow and flourish, these younger people need to be coming in, and they need to be sold the passion and why property is important. 100%. Because at 16 now, when you leave school and go into apprenticeship or into college, you don't know what you want to do. I mean, Jesus, I was 21 and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm 32 and I still don't know what I want to do fully for the rest of my life. So it's one of those things, but I know that property is the industry for me. Yeah. And that come from being younger and travelling around property, working in construction, working on house developments, building houses from the ground up and watching that happen. That's always been in the back of my mind, but I guess for those younger generations, that property apprenticeship isn't an option.
Not there, and also there's that, like you say, that exposure, you know, and I guess also that element of the reality of it too. You know, I think, you know, one thing we've seen an explosion of, and I'm a bit of a cheeky sort of thing, but I'm obsessed with it, you know, is all these programs about property as well. You know, and I love them. You know, I know. I watched Selling Manhattan the other day, great show. But on the flip side, you know, there's it's not a massive point, but also that it isn't reality.
It's not reality, no, absolutely not.
You know, that's where I see a lot of people, unfortunately, kind of maybe come and go quite quickly too, is that you see, what's the other one? It's Selling Sunset.
And what was the one DDRE in London did as well?
That's it, yeah. So, yes, Daniel Jagger's
that was.
So, you know, you see these programmes and it's like, that's really glitzy and glamorous. And don't get me wrong, there's some parts that are, you get to see some amazing houses, you get to go to some great events, but 95% of it is...
It's a one-bedroom flat in Kent Town.
Exactly. You know, it's still really enjoyable because you're learning the process, but I think it's that expectational side of things as well.
Yeah.
You know, can you earn really good money in a estate agency? Absolutely. Can you develop? I think it's one of the best industries for developing quickly through the ranks.
Absolutely.
100%. You know, I bought, you know, Manson McTaggart at 22. You know, so you really can power, that's not brag, you know, but you can really power through if you've got the dedication and that commitment. Yeah. But there's also that little thing called hard work that comes in, and I think
nothing comes for free, does it?
Nothing comes for free, and I think it's a real balancing act. It has to come from the top down, like you said. You know, of going there. You know, we had I think 4 or 5 students. It was a bit hectic actually, but you know, really enjoyed it on work experience with us.
Yeah.
Literally a couple of weeks ago, funny enough.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad to say that actually of the, I think it was 4, 3 of them were young women, which was brilliant. You know?
Amazing.
And I was so like, thank God, finally, because I say I get a lot of CVs, and it's, you know, and again, nothing wrong with that, of course, but, you know, I want everyone to be in the industry, but it's predominantly male kind of dominated.
Yeah, especially on the sales side. I find more on the sales side than the lettings, and I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it's down to the salesperson thought process.
Social constructs, yeah.
Yeah, so lettings is more fluffy, isn't
lettings
it?
Is women.
More customer service.
Total bollocks.
Yeah.
You know, they're both. In fact, I find that, you know, we've got a lettings division, and just as hard, if not harder than sales, to be quite honest with you. Lettings.
It's consistent, isn't it? It's constant. It doesn't stop.
Relentless. But also, I find I won't pinch their data, but a very well-known kind of figure I'm seeing him next week in the sort of property sphere on LinkedIn and all these things. You know, he runs a self-employed model across everything, and he was saying essentially that of those people, because that's another thing that's changing, a lot of people kind of converting to different models, etc.
Yep.
Ourselves included in many respects. That the very, very best agents that he had, based on data alone, so that's kind of completions, I assume, and volume and blah, 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 were women. You know, I think that's really powerful. You know, that's obviously a very small data point. You know, it could be different, who knows? But just that alone, I think, is something that I think we should all be shouting about in many respects.
Yep.
You know, and not to say, you know, again, you've got to be conscious of, you know, you don't want to be like, screw men, we don't want them with you. You know, it's nothing like that. It's just you want to have, we mentioned it right at the start, playing to people's strengths.
Yeah, and I think when obviously I'm part of the committee for women in residential property,
exactly, yeah.
And one of the statistics actually, which is one of the reasons I really went into it. I'm the head of wellbeing, which is obviously because of my neurodivergence, and really wanting to make that change because of personal experience in the industry. But the statistics on senior management, 80% male, 20% female. And then you've got people on the front line that are female that are getting paid ridiculously low wages. So there's this massive gender pay gap as well. And there's all of these elements, I think, that put people off coming into the industry because of those factors. And it's a shame because, okay, there's a lot of women that are on the front line, but is that because they're better at customer service, in your opinion, or because you would rather stay in your role until you're 80 and pass it down to someone in your family because they're a man? And I think that's the difficulty.
Mindset.
It's that mindset that kind of detriments the industry because, like you say, with the self-employed models, some of the most successful are female. Yeah. They have that capability. They're organised. They're passionate. They show compassion to people as well.
Huge, that empathetic
empathy,
nature, which again,
emotional side.
It's, you know, facts are facts. You know, from a wiring and a logical and a hormonal perspective. You know, of course, there's lots of different ways of cutting it, and don't say anything wrong, but you know, realistically, women are, it's scientifically proven, they are more empathetic. They are usually more emotionally connected. Et cetera. And again, that's not a bad or a good thing. It's just, it's beneficial in some ways and probably not beneficial in others.
And
so
I
play
think,
to your strengths.
I think that compassion and empathy plays for a great manager, personally, 100%. Because especially in this day and age where you've got, people are much more sensitive now than they used to be.
Totally.
That need for a thick skin isn't so needed anymore because the younger generations can take the mental health days and do the things without feeling any repercussions. Whereas someone in my generation is panic about taking a day off because they might get sacked. Not that would happen, but that's just how we've been wired up, and that's the generational difference. But having someone that has that empathy, not saying that men don't have it, because there's some I've had some fantastic male managers. Currently I'm under 2, and they're brilliant. They manage me amazingly. They work with my ADHD, they give me my time when I need my time. They're fantastic. So not everyone's the same, but this isn't Frontline Estate Agency, this is PropTech. So it's a different world altogether. So I think there are room for changes, for sure.
Oh, there is. There's no doubt about it. And also I think, again, the key for me is, and I don't think it's talked about enough, is everything should just be merit-based. You know, I don't care if you're 80, 17, male, female, anything in between, you know, whatever you want, you know.
However you
should
identify.
Always be based upon
skill set.
Merit. You know, and I think that is something that fundamentally, I think, you know, I mean, that statistic's quite shocking, you said about the 80-20. I'd like to think, and it sounds like I may be wrong, that things are definitely, well, just having these conversations is going in the right, the better direction, of course. But it goes to show how much room there is there. And again, it's not saying, oh, it needs to be 50-50 or 60-40 the other way. You know, the actual percentages are kind of bollocks. Like, it is what it is. But what it is saying is making sure that every door for everyone on a merit-based system
Yeah.
is open.
Yeah, regardless of sex, regardless of age.
Yeah.
You should be given the role based on your
if you're good enough, you're old enough,
quality
or if you're good
for the
enough,
job.
or whatever enough.
Yeah.
Because I, much smaller scale, but something that I've always found and very similar. Obviously being on the other side as a male. I hope that was obvious, but on the flip side, thinking things like age, for example. I was again. You spoke about someone saying something. You were little. When I was little, I think I was 12 or 13. I was really big into rugby, really big into sport.
Yep.
And I was sort of playing 3, sometimes 4 years above my age.
Yep.
And I remember being a little bit, like 12 or 13, you're a bit nervous. The other guys are like 3 times the size of you, blah, blah. But I remember one thing my coach said to me, because I was like, are you sure, sort of thing? And he said, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And that stuck with me. Literally, I've based my career off it, basically, because at 22, I'm like, oh, do I go for running an agency? Oh, and it's like, well, if I'm good enough, I'm old enough.
Yep.
And that should be universally the same, not just with age, though, but with every factor.
Everything.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I do think that that things will, hopefully, be going much faster in the right direction as the constructs of even like the working day is changing. I think agency, for example, and yes, we still have physical offices, and yes, we still are open like hours, but actually even for some, I'd like to think on a more forward-thinking side of agency, that it's a lifestyle. The job is a lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's give and take. And actually, if someone needs to, I'm very proud to say we're basically a 50-50 split on male and women across my organisation. Although having said that, 3 years ago we weren't, and that wasn't by design. It was just so happened that I think that we had like 1 or 2 women in the organisation. Yeah. Unfortunately, I managed to recruit some fabulous women. Wendy's a lettings director. She runs the lettings business, and
that's incredible.
Absolute gem. My sort of total group administrator, Rachel, is phenomenal, and I do think her skill set. I couldn't. Excuse my language. I couldn't do it. Absolutely not. So again, it's having the right people in the right places to develop themselves, but also develop the business and the industry as a whole. But I think as it's becoming more of a lifestyle business where you are, you might be working on your phone on a Sunday, but if you do need to leave, a lot of the ladies have children, for example, and you do have to go do the school run or something. 20 years ago, where it would be like, well, either you just don't work at all, you stay at home, that kind of attitude.
Get childcare.
Or, exactly. I think it's now changing a lot more, and actually there's that element of flexibility. And I always say to people, I don't actually give a shit how long you work. Yeah. As long as the job's done.
As long as it's done, yeah. And I think COVID was, going back to it, but COVID was a massive change in people's brains and the 9-to-5 construct and that flexible working. Yeah, of course, in certain industries, you can't have that flexible working because the core hours are the core hours. But if someone needs a doctor's appointment, they shouldn't need to book off a half day to go to that doctor's appointment. They should just be able to go and come back to their day without it affecting anything. You just make up the time if that's what they want. You take holiday for this or whatever. It's give and take. I've always said this to everyone and anyone. It's total give and take. And I think, any shrewd manager, business owner, whatever it might be, shrewd and kind of forward thinking, you can tell anyway. If someone's putting in a shift, but you'll know if someone's taking the piss. So it's kind of about, let's not tiptoe around all these subjects. Let's not kind of all be, it's very clear that if you apply, my favourite word, common sense, to most scenarios, everything's pretty logical, really. And, everyone makes mistakes and blah, blah, blah. But realistically, most business would run so much smoother if they actually got rid of some of the crappy processes and just led with a common sense approach. Yeah. It's just... eliminate the faff and just do the job. Just do the do. Why does it all of this fluff around things a lot of the time? And that's one thing I love about this company is that I can manage my day how I see fit. There's no silly processes that I have to abide by. If I want to take 2 hours out of my day and make the time up, I can take 2 hours out of my day and make the time up without question. As long as it's in my diary, I'm not questioned. And that is a 2025 business, in my opinion. In your diary and you're delivering results. Yeah. If you're doing both of those things, who can argue with that? Exactly. And in 2025, come on. We're not in the 1980s or even 70s now. It's 2025. Everything's everywhere now, isn't it? It's all in your hands. It's on your phone. It's on, I take laptops. I go around my different offices all the time, and and actually it keeps me
sustained and keeps me kind of hungry, because it's like not the same scenery every day, etc., etc. So, you know, it's a really modern way, and I think, as I say, we'll see it evolve over the next 5 years, hopefully, even more so from the past 5.
I think from what I've witnessed, especially in the last couple, it's definitely on the right track. There's a lot of allyship that's coming in now where men are working with, like we've got male allies on women in residential property that are part of our advisory teams, and they promote us as women. They invite us to the podcast. They get us on the panels. They promote our businesses, and that is it's that simple to work to collaborate.
The long and short of it, truthfully, the long and short of it, I know this isn't the case, but it shouldn't even be a conversation.
It shouldn't, but this is the thing. Like, it's that simple to be an ally of working with women and promoting women in the industry. They're not a competition. Everyone is in it for the same purpose. Women should not be competing against men. Men should not be competing against men, and women should not be competing against women, and everything in between. We're all in this industry for one end goal, and that is to sell property, provide a service, or rent a property and provide a service, or sell a product to streamline workflows. That is what we are here for. Our end goal is all the same. So why are we competing with each other?
100%. Collaboration, not competition.
Right? Yeah. So just referring somebody that you've spoken to a landlord that deals with a HMO, and you want to refer them to a prop tech company that deals with utilities management, well, you put them in contact with a woman that you know that works for that business. It's that simple.
Costs nothing. It's just good business.
Yeah, good business. Exactly that.
If more people take note of that, the world will be a much better place.
Yeah, and it's definitely going in the right direction. There's still a lot of room for improvement, but it's definitely on the right track.
Always room. But you know, what a few subjects we've covered, and I think we'll round it off there. But you know, it's fascinating been talking to you about your story, what you're looking to do, where Bricks and Logic are going. You know, we're really interested to know more ourselves, but I'm sure other people will be as well off the back of this. And obviously at the end there, that youth and women in the industry that is so under talked about, but for what reason I just can't think. It's a huge benefit and pro to kind of getting this kind of whole industry moving forward, hopefully in the right direction. So Jade, thank you so much for coming on.
No worries, thanks for having me
down.
Pleasure to see you. Thank you.
And hopefully you'll be back on at some point in the future.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Hopefully. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Cheers. Tom here, and thank you so much for tuning in to the latest episode of The Boardroom. If you like what you heard, do like and subscribe to be kept up to date with the latest podcast that we'll be releasing. And if you'd like to join me in The Boardroom, I'd absolutely love to hear from you, and maybe I'll see you on the next one.